Welcome to this special webinar called ICE and Immigration Enforcement, Law, Rights, and Lessons Learned. My name is Dr. Stephen Sussman. I am a professor of public administration in the Andreas School of Business and Public Administration at Barry University in Miami and co-founder of the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research. Dr. Luis Fleischman here in the meeting tonight, and I, along with a team of dedicated colleagues, established the center as an outlet for the marketplace of ideas. The Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research is a nonpartisan public policy organization, a research center, and a think tank. We are a gathering of scholars, experts, and community stakeholders engaged in research and dialogue in an effort to create practical policy recommendations to current local, national, and international challenges. Our core values of diversity, balance, and community define us and set us apart from other organizations. As an organization, we value diverse voices and views, and we see it as a means to create a healthy debate. The center provides a balanced platform where civilized communication, exchange of ideas, and inclusion prevail over party politics and dogmatic views. Our objective is to be a community and place of gathering for academics, professionals, elected officials, decision makers, and civil society groups and leaders. So please visit our website at palmbeachdemocracy.org. And I'm going to stop because I want people to come in. Okay, there we go. At palmbeachdemocracy.org. On the site, you'll find links to our past webinars and links to the many articles we've published over the years. Additionally, on our website, you'll find a donation button. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Through your generous donations, we are able to bring you important and timely programs and articles. And tonight's program is no exception. This evening, we are privileged to host a panel of two distinguished experts whose diverse backgrounds will enrich our discussion on the current immigration debate. We are pleased to welcome former Congressman Mark Foley and immigration attorney Richard Hujber, I want to get that right.
Huber's fine.
Huber, okay.
Yeah.
I needed to practice that, so I apologize. So this evening, I will serve as moderator. I'll begin by offering a few opening thoughts to frame our discussion. I will then introduce, with a little bio, each of our speakers and turn the floor over to them for their opening remarks. After their presentations, we will move into a moderated discussion, opening it to audience questions. You can write your question in the chat box or raise your emoji hands. So with that, I will begin with the program. And as moderator, I'll give my opening remarks with the introductions. So at the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research, our mission is to promote serious dialogue about the strength of our democratic institutions and the rule of law that sustains them. Immigration policy sits directly at that intersection. As a scholar of public administration, I view immigration not only as a political issue, but as a test of institutional capacity, administrative design, and the consistent application of law. So thank you for joining us for this important conversation. Immigration is one of the most complex and these are my opinions, emotionally charged public policy issues we face today. It implicates national sovereignty, economic stability, humanitarian responsibility, public safety, and the rule of law. It also exposes tensions between federal authority, state and local capacity, and the lived realities of communities across the country. At the border, we continue to see sustained pressure on enforcement systems and humanitarian infrastructure. Inside the country, Immigration and Customs Enforcement conducts interior enforcement operations under shifting federal priorities. Immigration courts face significant backlogs. Enforcement priorities change from one administration to another. Local governments are increasingly drawn into policy debates they were never designed to manage. These developments are not abstract policy debates. They shape the lived realities of individuals and families navigating the immigration system. They also affect employers, local communities, universities, and public officials who must respond to changing enforcement priorities. In periods of policy uncertainty and heightened public debate, concern and anxiety can extend beyond those directly involved in immigration proceedings. That in turn can affect broader public confidence in how these systems function. What makes this moment significant is not only the volume of migration, but the institutional strains. Questions about executive authority, congressional responsibility, agency discretion, enforcement capacity, and due process are unfolding in real time. When immigration policy becomes unstable or inconsistent, public trust in governance is tested. So tonight's discussion is not about slogans. It's about how a constitutional democracy manages borders, enforces laws, protects rights, and maintains institutional credibility at the same time. This is the conversation we hope to have this evening. So with that, and I said it fast because I want to leave room for our speakers, to begin our discussion, I'd like to first turn to Congressman Mark Foley. Congressman Foley was appointed to the Lake Worth City Commission, I think back when it was just Lake Worth, yes. But the Lake Worth City Commission at the age of 23. And we happen to be the same age. So what was I doing at 23 when he was involved in local government? The youngest ever elected to office. He served 2 terms, and in 1990 was elected to the Florida House of Representatives. In 1992, he was elected to the Florida Senate, and in 1994 to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served on the Ways and Means Committee and was a deputy majority whip until his resignation in 2006. Congressman Foley, I'll turn it over to you with this question, and you can take it any direction you want. Drawing on your experience in state government and as a member of the Congress, U.S. Congress, I'd like you to step back and help us understand how U.S. immigration policy arrived at its current moment. How did congressional action, inaction, and political incentives shape the system we see today? And what does that tell us about the balance between legislative responsibility and executive authority on immigration? And with that, I turn it over to you, Congressman Foley.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you all tonight. It's interesting when I look back at the story arc of immigration. It's always been with us. No one wants to deal with it, and consequently, we have problems in the system. They're unimaginable. For instance, it was reported in the newspaper that I was helping Puerto Rico decide whether they wanted to be a commonwealth or a state. When I came back to my district during a town hall meeting, I was attacked by several in the audience. Why are you helping those people? I go, they're American citizens. They said, no, they're not. And I go, well, history must be unfolded tonight because they are U.S. citizens, Spanish-American War. Can I help you understand this? But that is the crux of the problem we're dealing with. You know, I have my grandmother's birth certificate here from Nowy Sącz, Poland. Mm-hmm. I also have her immigration document where she was sworn in as a U.S. citizen. I've always kept that as a touchstone in my heart because we are all lucky to be here. We are all lucky to be given a chance to be American citizens. The journey has been tortuous, and we can only ask Marco Rubio what it was like with the Gang of Eight, because that was the first time I saw Congress trying to work on a system that would allow a fair immigration process. We've always assumed that there were people that came illegally, and now the pejorative is they're illegals, they must go home. Kristi Noem constantly has these commercials on that drive me crazy. Self-deport will help you get back to the home, and then you can maybe apply and become an American citizen. Most of the people she's talking about do not know where their home is. They were here as children. They came not against their will, but with their parents. They've inculcated into our country, and now we're wonderful citizens working hard. But they live in the shadow, and that fear brings out a reality that's not even acceptable. I remember situations in Lake Worth, Florida, where cops would pull over people and then try and bribe them to give them money so they wouldn't report them because they knew they'd be deported. Employers taking advantage of these workers, cashing their checks and taking part of their paycheck in order to use their Social Security number to legitimize the transaction at a bank. It's reprehensible. Now, we find ourselves in a place where politics has been ruling this situation for decades. No one wants to touch immigration because there are those xenophobics who live in our country who believe they're the only ones eligible to be citizens of the United States. And it's troublesome to me that I see so many people that are worthy, that work here, that have done incredible things for our communities, and are yet marginalized by the fact that they don't have that one document. Richard knows a case recently where the head person at the Beach A restaurant in Palm Beach was taken because he was pulled over. I think there was a window tint issue. I'm not sure it was FHP or the Sheriff's Department. They took him down to a Chrome Detention Center and held him for 4 or 5 days. He's been here 30 years. Everyone knows him. In fact, President Trump's sister, Marianne, the former federal judge, was a frequent visitor of the 2 restaurants in question. So I put it on the web. I did a video broadcast, and this was before the 2 people were killed. But I virtually said that we've got to figure out a resolution to this. Immigration hired people that were ill-trained, ill-equipped to be agents. Number one, they hired people without training, without psychological testing, because they were told to go round up people who are illegally in this country. As someone who's studied this issue deeply, I can tell you there are a lot of immigrants who are at the high-tech companies around our country that have overstayed visa. They work for Google, they work for Microsoft, they work for Apple, but we don't talk about them. We try to assume that everybody's either a gardener or a dishwasher, which is another thing that's infuriated me. I heard a Democratic candidate for governor several years ago in a speech in Tampa, Florida, saying, we need these people. We need these people to make the beds in our hotels, pick the crops, and wash our dishes. To me, that's offensive. We shouldn't dumb it down to people and assume it's only the lower echelon of society that's breaking the rules. So I am perplexed that we can't come to a resolution. Now, I know, I think Luis asked me to talk about the DREAM Act that's currently a legislative initiative by 2 female members of Congress, one from Miami, a Republican, and the other one is a Democrat. Well, when I read the text of the bill,
Dignity Act.
Yeah, the Dignity Act.
Dignity Act, yeah.
Well, it sounds great. But the first thing it says, you need $7,000 to $10,000 to file an application. Very few of the people that are working hard every day have that money. So it's completely off the charts from day one. You can't expect people to get in line and put up that kind of cash to try and potentially be likely to get a citizenship, a pass, a little note, a little card that says you may or may not be eligible to be here. So I applaud the effort to discuss making an attempt to bring people out of the shadows, but we've got to do better than that. The Defense Department's using a company called Palantir, which I happen to have an investment in, that's been a very successful investment. Palantir is an incredible company that's working with the defense industry in munitions, the art of war, using drones, doing things differently than we have in the past. Maybe Kristi Noem ought to hire them. to find a way to let people come into the portal, say where they've been, how long they've been here, what schools they have attended, and give them a slip that says you are at least in the queue. So if you're pulled over by a police officer, you have something to show them. Because this rounding them up at garden stores, at churches, at festivals, at Home Depots is asinine. What I said to the president, I said, I applauded you for going after the violent criminal gangs. One only needs to look at the news report of what's happening in Puerto Vallarta and say there is a problem when you let the criminals run the community. There is a problem when Tren de Aragua or MS-13 is in your community and ruling the roost. So let's differentiate between the criminal aliens and the hardworking individuals that make up the fabric of our country. Where we have to have a debate and discussion is figuring out those two parallel universes. I applauded the president because I want those people out of this country. They're taking advantage of people. They're ruining our communities. They're delivering drugs and illegal child abuse and all kinds of things that are occurring in our cities. So we have to focus on those. But the mission became blurred because they said we're going to get rid of all people that are legally here. Well, good luck. There's no way you can effectuate the arrest of people that are in this country illegally because we don't even know the number. It could be up to 40 million people. Somebody said, oh, no, there's only 11. Listen, there was 11 million when Ronald Reagan was president. So there's probably 40 million today and growing. And nobody's going to step out of the shadows if you have a $7,000 or $10,000 fee to start. They have to raise their kids. They have to feed their families. They do not have that money. So as we discuss and debate this, I pray that there's a higher purpose. But to me, having been in the process, I'm not sure there's light at the end of the tunnel because there's a deep prejudice that exists. There's a lot of people on my side of the aisle that think unless you're white, you're not acceptable. You're part of this Rotary Club, this good old boys network that we don't want those people here. When you use terms like those people, it starts a downhill movement where you're not even discussing humanity. You're not discussing the reasonableness by which we need these people. And I'll make one final point. Our Social Security system will collapse if we don't have new participants in the system. When they talk about getting rid of these millions of people that are here, you watch particularly Republicans when they realize there's such a gaping hole in the entitlement programs because they've kicked out all these people that were once working and paying into the system. So I hope that at some point someone will stand up, and these two congressional women have at least tried to present legislation that will work. But I ask them again, and I would love to talk to them and say, make it 1,500, make it 500, make it easy, make it computer literate where somebody signs into a portal and can get the method start. Now, Richard knows, and he's worked with a number of cases that I'm familiar with. These people have tried. They have outstanding jobs. They have children born in America, and yet they're still out there trying to get some resolution to a legitimacy for their citizenship application. That's unacceptable. Some have been here. Jose, I think, was here, Richard, 30 years. His nephew was here at least 25. You know, let's stop talking about they illegally came to the country and using words that are so pejorative. Say, how did you get here? Why are you here? What have you been doing since you've been here? And let's find a way to legitimize not amnesty, but don't start throwing around $10,000 bounties to become eligible to stand in line somewhere.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. And we'll come back with questions after Richard. So let me just do a quick intro or bio of Richard. Richard Hujber is an immigration attorney, born and raised here in Miami. And as he mentioned earlier, before some of you came, the son of Hungarian immigrants. He earned his law degree from the University of Florida College of Law and received numerous academic awards. Mr. Hujber previously served as a judicial law clerk and attorney advisor with the United States Department of Justice, Executive Office for Immigration Review. He later served as attorney advisor to the Miami Immigration Court and to the Board of Immigration Appeals, the highest immigration tribunal in the U.S., where he drafted hundreds of final written immigration decisions nationwide. He received multiple awards and outstanding performance evaluations during his service with the Department of Justice. Following his government career, he entered the private practice and has nearly 30 years of experience in all aspects of immigration law, including asylum, litigation, and employment-based immigration. And here in South Florida, to his benefit, he is fluent in Spanish and Hungarian, and is a member of the Florida Bar, American Immigration Lawyers Association, and is licensed to practice law in the United States District Courts for the Southern and Middle Districts of Florida. He's also the past chairman of the Immigration Committee for the Palm Beach County Bar Association. So my question to you, Richard, to kick this off, from your perspective as a practicing attorney, how is the system functioning in practice right now? And where do you see the most significant gaps between immigration law as written and immigration law as experienced on the ground?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's such a complicated subject right now, and it's obviously a very hot topic these days. So that's a very big, broad, open spectrum of a question. And so I'm going to try to maybe focus it a little bit as far as my experience in my office, what we do mostly in terms of my own family, I guess, because my parents, as you indicated, came to the United States as refugees. They came through the asylum process. Lost both of my parents in the last couple of years within 6 months of each other. And I was fortunate to really sit down with them and talk to them about their journey to come to the United States. And, it's very uplifting and very just eye-opening to hear your parents tell you their story and how they came. And so they did wait for 3 years in refugee camps in Europe when the revolution took place in Hungary in 1956. There was about a week of freedom, and then the Soviet tanks came and crushed their revolution and sought real revenge against the people that had rose up against them. My dad was one of those people, and so they sought my dad and went after to my grandmother looking for my dad, and my mom also was part of it as well. So they had to escape, and they fled Hungary. And there's a book named The Bridge at Andau by James Michener, and this is literally the story of my father. It's pretty amazing in terms of escaping into Austria and bullets flying over his head, crossing this river into Austria as the Soviets were seeking their revenge and payback against the people that had rose up. And so I'm going to try to focus on asylum today in terms of the changes in the system as you raised in the question, in terms of the reality versus the law and the legal system we're supposed to be implementing and enforcing. I do a lot of detained cases as well, because obviously, as much as they're hard to do and kind of a pain to do because they're very emotional, very challenging, complicated cases, it's what's going on right now. So I have this background in the federal government. I do know the immigration judges very well. At the appeals level, I worked at the appeals court, as you indicated. So I have this as my background, my pedigree. So it's really hard to turn away cases when you have someone like Jose. And frankly, I represent Jose's brother as well. And we've got a big final hearing coming up in his case. And, that's another just amazing case where he's been here as well, almost 30 years, like his brother, 3 American citizen daughters, is facing deportation. But we have a very compelling application for something called the 10-year rule, or cancellation of removal, because he's been here for so long. He's just an amazing man. I've represented him probably for 12 years at this point. He was facing deportation even 10, 12 years ago, and I've been fighting his case for a good 10, 12 years at this point. So we're finally reaching a point where hopefully we can get some resolution in his case. And that is definitely one of the issues we'll talk about as far as backlogs and delays, because they exist and they're very significant. But in terms of, I wanted to address some of the things that Mark raised too, because I was kind of taking notes. I think, and I shouldn't say Mark, Congressman Foley.
Mark is fine. Mark is fine.
And we did have lunch, and that was wonderful. Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure. And so, but some of the things you mentioned really rang true to me in terms of that commercial that Kristi Noem's been doing. I see that commercial too, and I got to tell you something. It is so disturbing and so troubling as an immigration lawyer, because it's kind of like this bait and switch or a false advertising thing that's going on. Because as you know, it's rare to find someone that's been here in this country that hasn't been here for more than 6 months without status. I mean, I would say 95+% of people in this country that do not have immigration status are here more than 6 months without status. I mean, and most would probably be here, I'd say, more than a year without status. And I mentioned that because if you leave this country and you've been here out of status for more than 6 months, you're immediately hit with a 3-year bar that you cannot come back. And if you've been here more than 1 year illegally, then you're now hit with a 10-year bar that you cannot come back. And this was a big deal that Congress passed this into law. I was working at the immigration court in Miami in 1996, 97. So it was IRA is the acronym for, the laws and how they do these things. But it was a Republican Congress. They put in these 3 and 10-year bars basically as a punishment for people that were here for a certain period of time without status. But what it's really done, like so many things that Congress seems to do, is make things far worse. Because in that commercial, there's the line about you can come back, but with these 10-year and 3-year bars, you can't come back. And of course, there's no mention of that. There's no change to that. And as an immigration lawyer now for almost 30 years, it's malpractice for me to say to a client, listen, hey, that commercial, let's do it. Let's sign off and let's get on that CBP One app that Joe Biden created to encourage or allow people to come to the U.S. in a more lawful, orderly manner. And now it's been flipped around to use it to leave the country. And without the reality and the law being truly expressed to the people, it's really a bait and switch. And it's not just a disservice, frankly. It's really troubling and disturbing because a lot of these people could come back. I mean, I have clients that have been here so long that they do have a 21-year-old American citizen child. But for the fact that they came here 25 years ago, probably without a visa, that child could file for them. But they now have a 10-year bar. If they were to truly pursue the green card through that child, if they did it through a consular process overseas, they would immediately be hit with a 10-year bar the minute they left this country. So you may recall there was a 245I penalty that existed 25 years ago in 2001, where you would pay $1,000 penalty in order to fix your status with a family petition like that, with a labor certification that's a bona fide labor job offer through a company as well. And that was $1,000, and that's 25 years ago. So people were certainly willing to pay that back in those days. And I think maybe with inflation, I think they'd probably be willing to pay what you were saying as far as $1,500, $2,000, something to that effect. I agree with you. I think $7,000, $8,000 is pretty outrageous. But I can assure you, clients that I have that work very hard and are able to afford to pay me in certain cases, they'll come up with it. They'll come up with it because they are just that desperate. They are that frustrated. They're that willing to confront or in their situations after so many years in limbo. They'll come up with it one way or the other. And it's something that I think Congress should really look at, because this is a big moneymaker. This is a huge revenue when we're 39 or something $trillion in debt, or something to that effect, almost 40 trillion in debt. When you're talking about, as you indicated, 10, 15, 20 million people that potentially would pay $2,000, $3,000 or more to fix their status, that's a lot of money, and it's a lot of revenue, and could really put a dent, at least, into that huge debt that we have as a country. So I have a lot of respect for Maria Elvira Salazar as the congresswoman down in Miami. I've met her in person. I think she's interesting because she's obviously a Republican in a pretty Republican district down there. And this Dignity Act does make sense in a lot of ways. And frankly, she's taken a beating for raising it, because I think she's been trying to fight for this now for well over a year, maybe even a couple of years. And I think there are a lot of Republicans that basically feel that it's still premature, unfortunately, that feel like, yes, we've had success in kind of closing and sealing the border in this last 9-10 months or whatever, but that it's just too early to then start talking about legalization or a reform package like that until we actually truly not only seal the border, but I guess deport a lot more people, I guess, in the minds of a lot of people. So, I mean, the 3 and the 10-year bars to me are a huge problem. And this is something I talk to members of Congress about all the time. There's something called the National Day of Action. I'm going in April. We every year go up and meet with our members of Congress as immigration lawyers and try to, it's shocking. And please, I hope you won't take offense, how little they know about the laws that they pass, how little they know about the laws that were passed maybe 20, 30 years ago, including this 3 and 10-year bar. I mean, they're really kind of, I hate to say clueless, but they don't realize. It's almost like when you read an article about a case like Jose's or his brother Javier, and you see all these comments about, oh, he's been here 30 years. Why hasn't he fixed his status? Almost like he's not wanting to, or he's been sitting around refusing to, or is stubborn, or just, I don't know, naive or dumb. No, I mean, there's just not a way to do it, because the only way to do it is by leaving the country, and then you're hit with these bars. And a 10-year bar is significant when you're 50 years old, because there is no guarantee even in 10 years you're going to get it, because you've already been here so long illegally. You can imagine at the embassy 10 years later what the chances are of them giving you another chance to come back. So it's really pretty much a permanent bar for a lot of people, at least the way our embassies work overseas these days. So it's not that they don't necessarily want to, it's that they don't have a way to, or a pathway to it. You hear the word pathway a lot, but it's true in terms of having an actual pathway when there's not one that exists. It's kind of easy again for us as Americans to say, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you started this? What are you doing? Like you're not even wanting to, or you're not trying to. And that's really kind of offensive when you, as I do, know my clients and how hard they work and how important this subject is to them, especially today with everything that's going on under this administration. So it's definitely, it's a very challenging time. And again, one of the things I was going to talk about was asylum. I don't want to talk about it in too much detail. I don't want to put people to sleep, but in terms of asylum, it's become very difficult. I think my parents today would have a much more challenging time to be able to get asylum. And one of the reasons why is because, ironically, as I've had this debate with my parents and my siblings, that my parents passed through numerous countries in Europe to finally get to Holland, to Rotterdam, to Netherlands, which is where they wound up for most of that period of time, 2-3 years, waiting in refugee camps to finally come to the United States. And what we're doing right now when it comes to asylum is that if primarily, especially under the Biden administration, you came through various countries to come to the United States to seek asylum, what we're doing now is saying you got to go back to those countries to seek asylum. We're not going to give you that chance here in the States. So a Colombian that passed through Ecuador, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, under our new policies and these new treaties or agreements that, you know, President Trump has made with these countries, El Salvador is a big one. And it's funny how we have kept TPS. TPS still exists for El Salvador because of the relationship that Trump has with the president of El Salvador. And it's now the second most, or probably even more safe than this country at this point, the way he's cleaned up that country and jailed so many of the gangs and criminals in that country. That why is TPS continuing for the country of El Salvador when it's now a pretty safe country? Well, it's continuing because they have a relationship, and it's been made pretty clear to everybody that he doesn't want to take these people back. And so TPS, temporary protected status, continues for El Salvador, even though, again, it's a country that's definitely changed and improved quite a bit. But we're now not considering asylum cases for those people. And I have clients from Nicaragua, and I've been to Nicaragua. We're under this Ortega regime, this very left-wing regime. They have cracked down on the opposition. It's almost like there is no opposition at this point in Nicaragua. And a lot of Nicaraguans have come to this country seeking asylum because they oppose the regime. They've been jailed. They've been persecuted and threatened. And so as they've come from Nicaragua, obviously crossing Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico to come to the States to seek asylum, they're being sent back. And they're being sent back to those countries that truly do not have due process. They do not have a real asylum system in terms of consideration of their cases and their claims. And so it's just really gotten to a point for a lot of those people. And this is kind of a Trump revenge thing where his priority has become not just the criminals or the worst of the worst, as he claimed during the campaign, but it's also, in his mind, the recent entrants that came under Biden. In his mind, those people, and let's be honest, I think millions did come under Biden because quite a few came to my office. And Trump doesn't like that. He thinks that he waved them in. The border was insecure. He let the border open, as he said many times. He granted millions of paroles, you know, in a way that was frankly disturbing as a former government attorney. I don't think a parole should be just granted to everybody and anybody. They're generally a case-by-case humanitarian review or consideration. But his revenge now is we've got to get rid of these people that came under Biden, almost in a backdoor amnesty in his mind, And the only way we could do that is to deport these people that are seeking asylum. And a lot of the cases, frankly, are not very meritorious. They're not very strong. But to completely shut the door really raises questions of international law obligations that we have as a country. And yes, we certainly would have a limit. I mean, how many can you take in? Because the system is now backlogged and overwhelmed in terms of asylum. But as a member and as a signatory to United Nations, various treaties and international laws, we cannot deport someone to their death or their serious bodily injury. So, it's really a bit troubling today in terms of asylum cases. It's gotten very, very challenging, very difficult. And yes, to a certain extent, it's because of the actions of the prior administration in terms of the border, in terms of some of the things that this prior Biden administration was doing. But I'm concerned because there are certain cases that do have merit and that are good cases. And those cases wind up getting delayed more and more by the other cases. But in terms of giving everyone a certain amount of consideration and due process, some of the things that I'm seeing today in my practice are very disturbing in terms of it's just not happening. I've seen judges grant the government's motion to pre-termit an asylum application, basically disqualifying the person that has a pretty good asylum case. I had a good case from Nicaragua where the judge said, go back to Honduras and seek asylum there. You passed through that country. And that's it. He granted the government's motion to pre-termit or to disqualify that person from seeking asylum here in the United States. And that's going on quite a bit right now. And I don't think that, again, not only under international law, but as an immigration lawyer for as many years as I've been, it's just something I've never seen before. So asylum to me has been always a humanitarian type of case where we should give it its due review and due process and consideration. And a lot of people are escaping really horrific situations and conditions. And it's challenging because a lot of people don't necessarily qualify because it's not necessarily about their race or their religion or their political opinion. But some are. And so, to see the process really get curtailed like this and to get limited and restricted in this way, it's really troubling. And that's just the focus on asylum for now. But in terms of other detained cases, same thing. It's just becoming very, very challenging to get someone out with a bond these days. The worst of the worst is not the worst of the worst. They are grabbing people. You mentioned about, the focus or I think, basically, stereotyping immigrants in terms of, gardeners and construction. ICE is doing that every day. ICE is literally pulling over people in landscaping trucks, people in roofing construction type jobs and those kind of work vehicles on a daily basis. I tell my clients, listen, if you want to reduce your risk of getting detained or picked up, you can't be in those kind of vehicles anymore because they're truly a target. And I'm not just talking about ICE, obviously. I'm talking about local police that have been deputized under 287G, Florida Highway Patrol, and local police as well. These are the targets, and they have quotas and they have bonuses. So you have a quota per day that they're trying to meet in terms of arresting and detaining people, and they're winning bonuses for people who are doing a great job at grabbing as many people as possible and detaining them, which to me, again, in my day in the government, was something we never saw. We never had. We didn't have quotas. We may have had bonuses, but it wasn't bonuses, almost like bounty hunters grabbing as many people as possible in that kind of a way. So these are some of the circumstances today on the ground, just real life today, and the reality of the way things are going today that I'm dealing with and that I'm seeing. And so certainly it's disturbing and challenging, especially when it's not necessarily what I'd seen my prior 25 plus years. So yeah, those are some of the challenges I'm seeing.
Well, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mark, or Congressman Foley. I apologize. If you have questions, I'll kick it off. I have some questions and follow-up questions for both of you, but in the chat, I'll leave that open here. You can write your questions in the chat, or you can raise your emoji hand. That's the emoji hand. There you go. So if you don't know what an emoji hand is, I'm trying to decide the best way to go here. I actually had a situation happen to me that was at the time unique, and this was back in the I guess it was the 1990s. It was the Marielle Cuban situation. And I was a PhD student in political science at Georgia State University when the Atlanta Federal Prison had the riots. The Cuban detainees who were in prison were just sitting there with nothing happening to them. They were sitting there at that point for 5, 6, or 7 years. And the reason being, from what I learned, was they were considered excludable aliens. In other words, so many came, and Richard, you're probably familiar with that, and Mark, perhaps. They weren't, because there were so many that came over from Cuba, they gave them a pass to go in, and they'd be called at a certain point to come back. But they were considered excludable aliens. That was the term. And the ones that they found had prison records or issues from Cuba, they put them in prison, awaiting a hearing. And the hearings never came, and they rioted. And the head of at the time Atlanta Legal Aid tried to get attorneys to handle these cases, and he couldn't, pro bono, and he couldn't get enough lawyers to volunteer their time. So he went to law students because they weren't due any due process. You didn't need to be a lawyer to defend them. When he couldn't get enough law students, he went to political science PhD students. And wouldn't you know it, he called me, and I jumped at the chance, and I actually, not being a lawyer, defended one of these Cuban detainees. And that was a long story. I ended up writing a 30-some page brief, and he lost his case, and I think they sent him back to Cuba. And then I got a call asking me if I wanted another case. And I said, sorry, my guy is probably dead at this point, shot when he went back to Cuba. And so that was a different period of time, different issues. It was just very interesting. And I have a number of questions, but we have hands up. So I'm going to call on, as I see them, Tony Grogan, who was a longtime executive over at Newsmax, to ask the first question. And you have to take yourself off of mute. Want me to come back to? Oh, there you go, Tony.
No, I'm all right.
Okay.
I knew Mark Foley years ago as a good friend. And Mark, I wonder if you can comment on the reason behind a lot of the Republican consternation is because the Democrats wanted to bring in millions and millions of people for the census and the reapportionment of congressional seats. Is that not the underlying problem why Republicans want to expedite their removal? And I agree with you, there's individual cases that are pretty sad, and we need to do something about that. I'll stop.
Tony, there's no question that over the past 4 years that the influx of illegals, migrants, however you want to describe them, were seen as a building block for voting blocks. They'd disperse around the country. They'd vote in elections. Not all of them would, but there was a feeling among Republicans that they were stacking the deck by bringing people into communities and hoping that they would outweigh Republican sentiment and increase Democrats' chance of winning elections. I don't like to reduce it to voting blocks, but there was no question. Several million came in the Biden administration. Everyone saw the pictures. Everyone saw the influx of refugees, some warranted, some not. But the fact remains that we lost control of our borders. Almost every Democrat now says they support closed borders tighter border control, but want to have a resolution to the people that came here. Well, we can't solve everyone's problems. In the last 4 years, I would say those people have the least chance of becoming citizens, in my view. If I were the judge and jury of this issue, I would say if you came in the last 4 years, you have a harder challenge to become a U.S. citizen. But it's now penalizing those in the prior cases that have maybe been here 15, 20 years. So yes, there's politics involved. There's Republicans saying, oh, you just want to bring in these new voters to maintain a majority in your electoral pursuits. That's narrow-minded to some degree. And that's why I always go back to my feelings that each case has to be judged properly. What we talked about that bar that you couldn't come back for 3 or 10 years, that's a non-starter because they can't go back for 3 or 10 years because most of the people I care about and worry about are people that have been here since they were 3 years old. There's no going back to a home they don't know. There's no job for them. There's no community. They have no idea what it's like in Guatemala, Nicaragua, Colombia. So the humanitarian side of all of us has to start thinking about how to help people, how to make them feel part of this great country. I worry that as this immigration debate has gone on, that we're treating everybody that may have come here for the humanitarian reasons or asylum reasons are being discounted. It's like, no, you have no claim. I can tell you when TPS was put in on Haiti, I've been to Haiti many, many times. I tried to fix Haiti. I went down there when Aristide was there. The other president, I mean, I was down there so often people thought I wanted to be the ambassador to Haiti. But Haiti has unique problems, and they've only gotten worse. So when they revoked TPS, that caused a lot of consternation. Now, if you were a Cuban, you had an exclusive opportunity, wet foot, dry foot. If you made it to the beach, you were here and allowed to be here. That became very problematic for people of other nationalities. They're going, wait a minute, how can they get to shore, touch 1 foot on dry land? You're allowed in. The Haitian comes in and almost risks their life coming in a boat. They can get to shore, they're going to be sent home. So it was a dual standard. And it was frankly because of the political influence of Cuban Americans in Miami-Dade County that kind of projected that opportunity because they were fighting for their fellow man, which I don't disagree with the premise of their challenge, why they wanted to help their fellow mankind in Cuba. But it was, why isn't a person from Nicaragua under a dictatorial regime? Why wouldn't they be equally considered if they happen to land in Florida at Naples or Fort Myers? No, they can't stay. Only the Cuban can stay. So we've got to really go back over our entire policy. And to Richard's point, you can't have a 3-year or a 10-year bar. No one will sign up. No one will come out of the shadows. No one will show up to try and become legal because the threshold in the bar is too high, either financially or the fact that they'd have to go to a country they know nothing about and spend 3 years there hoping they got considered. That was a long answer. I'm sorry. I'll try and shorten it.
Very good.
Thank you. In order, if you don't mind, Emmanuel, I'll let Karen go first. Ladies first. So Karen,
that's
welcome.
fine. That's fine. Thank you. I wanted to thank both of the speakers. That's tremendously interesting. And I wanted to say to Mr. Hujber, jó estét kívánok. Nagyon kellemes volt hallani a szövegeid. My question is for Mr. Hujber. I wanted to write down the name of the book, but I kind of missed it. You said James Michener had written. My parents also came out of Hungary, so that hence the Hungarian. But I missed the name of the book, so it seems like it would be something I'd want to read.
Well, the Bridge at Endau, Andau. The Bridge at Endau is the name of the book by James Michener, and it's about the Hungarians that escaped Hungary after the revolution and the Soviet tanks came into Budapest and crushed the revolution. And it's, again, the bridge at Andau, Andau, James Michener. It's on Amazon. It's pretty much everywhere. And it's
Andau. Okay.
Andau, yes. And it's really the story of my father and so many Hungarians. It's really an amazing book.
Thank you. Yeah, my parents came after World War II, so they were refugees from World War II, and they came to Israel, and well, it was actually still under the British mandate. So they came here. They stayed in Israel and then eventually made their way to New York. But I then went back and lived in Hungary for several years and met a Hungarian and brought him here. So I know what it's like to go through the process of bringing a person into this country. And I will tell you, it was not too bad back. This was in 95 or 96. So I can only imagine what people are going through now. It's a whole different world, especially since 9/11. So anyway, thank you both. Excuse me?
Thank you, Karen. Tony, you want to go back on mute, I think, or something? Thank you, Karen. Before we move on, otherwise I won't. I want to just let everyone know that my wife's family is originally from Hungary as well. She's online, so I wanted to say that. Emmanuel, please, you're up.
Sure. I actually have a question for both speakers. For Congressman Foley, you mentioned the Gang of Eight and, how different efforts, bipartisan efforts have failed in the past to really tackle immigration policy. There are obviously many sticking points, but one of the main reasons why it's failed is I think that, especially within American conservative political thinking, there's the sense that if you allow immigrants to have either citizenship or some kind of permanent residency, that will incentivize potentially more illegal immigration in the future, because they, if they see that some people are getting, adjusted status, that would possibly in the future work out for them as well. So I was wondering what you thought about that argument. And for Mr. Hujber, I have a question as well for you. You mentioned briefly immigration judges, and I wanted to ask you about your thoughts about the independence of immigration judges, because as I understand it, unlike other federal judges who are appointed for life, the immigration judges are actually employees of the Department of Justice. So do they have quotas as well that they must fill, or what are your feelings about that?
Let me start with the notion that people will come to this country if it becomes easy. There's no question there's truth to that statement. And back when Reagan had an amnesty program and allowed those that were here to apply and become citizens, it created an influx of people. So that's where we've got to figure out the metrics of how to do this properly. You want to do it that requires responsibility. When my grandmother came, she had to have a clean bill of health. She had to get a job. She had to get her certificate from Pasadena Community College. She had to learn to speak English. There were requirements back in the day. Those no longer apply, it seems, in the real world. So to some degree, that's the intrepidation of members of Congress. If we grant these benefits, will this create an influx? Now, from my perspective, this country needs help. We need people here. We need people working. We need the intellect of people from all over the world. When I went to India and saw the scientific community teaching these 10-year-olds how to code computers, it was phenomenal. Our kids weren't even learning anything, and these kids were learning how to program for Microsoft, Intel, and what have you. So part of our efforts have to be about getting up to speed on our educational prowess for citizens, be they born here or late arrivals. But there is that dynamic that makes people say, if you pass an amnesty, it'll only bring millions more. And that's a concern that I know members of both sides of the aisle have.
Thank you, Mark. My job's easy. I have this whole list of questions, and we have so many questions in the audience. So let me, Luis, I hope you can wait for 1 second.
No, I should be the last. Don't worry.
Okay. I will ask Terry. Terry, a professor from the University of Central Florida, political
Just a
science.
second question, and I think it's such a good question. If you don't mind, Terry, I'm sorry to
Not
jump
at
in.
all.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I really want to speak about this because the independence of the immigration court to me is such an important subject and issue. I can tell you the immigration court in Miami is where I started in 1995. That's over 30 years ago. And as a law student at the time with a mustache, who, as the son of immigrants, had really no connections. I mean, all my friends in law school were working at these big firms, making all this big money in the summer and internships and opportunities and clerkships. I took this internship at the Miami Immigration Court in the summer of 1995. It wasn't paid. I was driving my Ford Escort without air conditioning. I didn't know how to tie a tie. My brother helped me with the air conditioning on my car. My dad taught me and showed me how to tie a tie for the first time. It's just such a huge change in the last 30 years. What's happened when it comes to our courts? He's right in terms of immigration judges. They're not federal judges. They're not tenured like for life judges. They are employees in the U.S. Department of Justice. And they are facing, especially today, a lot of scrutiny because they are receiving directives from this administration in terms of decision-making and policy and quotas, yes, and pressure. And I have a lot of friends that are judges. I've interviewed myself now after all these years to be an immigration judge, both under the Obama administration and under the first Trump administration. I decided, what the hell, let me interview and see what it's going to be like under Trump. And the difference in the interviews between the Obama and the Trump administrations to become an immigration judge were glaring. I mean, they were just amazing. Under Obama, we were told, be patient, hear the cases out, give the respondents, which are the people in front of you, a full opportunity to be heard and due process, et cetera. Under Trump, it was essentially how many people can you deport and how fast? And I don't mean to, just simplify it like that. But I think that there today is a huge amount of pressure. I know of a lot of judges that were considered too immigrant friendly and granting, let's say, too many asylum cases. And on a Friday afternoon, sitting on the bench in the middle of a hearing, they'd get the email saying, you're done, you're terminated, no notice, and just, collect your stuff and leave the building. And these are immigration judges, and they're just, unfortunately, under this administration, personas non gratas at this point in terms of if you were too favorable to immigrants, if you granted too many cases. Under this administration, there's no job security. You're not a judge for life, which gives you that job security and their independence that I think is so important. So it's become a huge concern. I have, again, a lot of judges that are friends that have wound up retiring or being forced out of their job as a judge and off the bench. Because, again, neutrality is really hard to continue under this administration. Now, the system has been abused quite a bit. There are a lot of frivolous asylum cases. There is no doubt about it. They come to my office. A lot of clients will come in, and when I ask them, I see you have an asylum case pending. Tell me about your case. There's literally no case. In a lot of these situations, they're coming here to join family, their own parents, for example, that left their countries in Central America, and they were raised by their grandparents. And once they reach a certain age, the grandparents are like, we're done with you. Go to America and join your parents. But the parents don't have status here either. And so it's to a certain extent a truth to say, especially under Joe Biden's administration and the border policies of that administration, that a lot of these asylum cases were not meritorious. And they were very honest with me in my office, and I appreciated their honesty and their candor. But frankly, I could not represent them in a case where truly the intent of coming here was to join family that was here illegally, and illegally for years, even decades. So it's a balance. It's a real interesting dichotomy and a contrast where you want to enforce the laws. There are people in this country that have a final order of deportation for years, and those orders were not enforced. And over the course of years, that many people multiplied exponentially to the point where I believe there's more than 1 million people in this country now that have a final order of deportation, most of which were cases that were heard by an immigration judge, denied by an immigration judge. An appeal was even taken potentially to the appeals court where I used to work, the Board of Immigration Appeals. And after all of that's been exhausted and a judge and the final orders entered of deportation, they just weren't deported. There was no enforcement of these orders. So you have a lot of people in this country with a final order of deportation. Some, and I'm thinking of very few, are in absentia orders, meaning they didn't go to the hearing. Some intentionally chose not to go out of fear and to abscond and just go under the table, so to speak, and not show up to the hearings. Some may not have known about their hearing. There's a lot of fraud. Notarios out in the community that fill out paperwork for immigrants, not telling the immigrants that if the case is not a viable case, it gets referred to the immigration court. They use their own P.O. box or their own little office in a strip plaza. Don't tell them that here comes a hearing notice. Now you're in front of an immigration judge and you're in deportation. And so they don't lose business in the community. They don't tell them and they don't show up to the hearings. And as a result, there's a lot of these in absentia orders. And a lot of the people, frankly, don't even know. I'm the one to tell a client sometimes in my office for the first time that they've got this old in absentia order from years ago that they didn't even know about. And they probably had 2-3 kids, American kids, and they keep working and bought a house even, et cetera. So it's truly a complicated issue because I can see both sides of this issue. Again, I'm the son of immigrants. I grew up speaking Hungarian in the house. I learned Spanish. When the Cubans came in Mariel, so when we mentioned that earlier, my parents sat us down and said, what are we going to do? There's something called white flight in Miami. If you lived in Miami, where a lot of people decided to leave because 140,000 Cubans came within a matter of a few months. And I was in school and I saw the change in terms of between just friends of mine in school. And all of a sudden, a bunch of Cubans came and a lot of people left. My parents decided we're going to stay because they're coming for the exact same reasons that we came, which is they're escaping communism and there was a revolution and Castro. And so our similarities were so amazing. And I danced more quinces than any gringo on this planet. I danced salsa merengue. I learned to speak Spanish fluently in the flea market in Hialeah. My dad had a plant nursery, so I got to learn Spanish fluently in those years. So it was a very interesting time. And it's just frankly an issue that is so complicated for so many reasons because I can see both sides to this story. That's why I actually interviewed to be an immigration judge. Again, as a son of immigrants, I see the immigrant story, and this is the American dream. And this country is built on immigrants and our history in terms of legal immigration in particular. But I also see the other side where the system has seen a lot of abuse, a lot of frivolous cases, a lot of people buying time with cases that don't even have any merit. Multiple deportations and keep coming back through the border over and over again, like the border doesn't exist. I've seen so many cases like that. And yes, people even with criminal records that, need to be deported. And for years, under the prior administration, there was no real interior enforcement or deportations of people, even with criminal records. And so, it's a balance. It's a scale of justice, so to speak, where you have to consider each case, I would say, like the Congressman said, on a case-by-case basis. But there are certain interests on both sides to this that make this a very complicated issue.
Thank you, Richard. And Emmanuel, I apologize. I know you did ask that question to both panelists, so I apologize for that. But let's go to Terry.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to hear Richard's points before I ask my question. And it's not as much a question, but I guess I was reflecting on listening to this discussion about sort of the focus of this panel, which is the first word in the title is ICE. In other words, there's a focus on enforcement. And this discussion has been organized around policy making. In other words, immigration law should be this or should be that or what have you. So I'm wondering where our panelists stand on enforcement of existing law. Imagining that immigration law will not be changed in the next X number of years. Why is there so much focus on ICE? What are the enforcement issues as they relate to ICE, and how might that shape our discussion in the future about policy change?
In my view, ICE has gone overboard, as I said earlier, on going to festivals, going to churches, going to garden shops. They're after the poor immigrant who's working hard to feed their families. I supported the president on criminal illegal aliens. There was a case, many in Colorado, you may remember, Trinidad Uragua had set up shop in a complex. And the governor of Colorado said, oh, it's just a complex. It's one condominium unit. Well, if you use that mindset, then multiple condominium units will soon be occupied by these same nefarious gangs. So I always ask members of the elected class to separate the two. Look at people differently. Don't assume everybody from Colombia is a drug dealer. Don't assume, because I remembered having to help the Catholic priests in my community try and get Colombian residents here. And the one reason they weren't allowed to even get a visa was their likelihood of returning to Colombia was nil. So it already created a note, we're not giving visas to Colombians coming to the United States. So people had taken advantage, and now everyone else was being penalized by that. So ICE's efforts, I understand what they're trying to do, but they went ahead and hired thousands of people that I would not give a job as a school crossing guard. They don't have the psychological profile. They don't have the intellect. They don't have the training. I think they were given a 12-week course on being ICE agents. Well, 12 weeks is not enough to deal with the complexities of immigration law and the people you're about to try to apprehend. So they hired all these people. They made a big fanfare of it. We're going to remove all these criminal illegal aliens. And as Richard said, then there was a quota. So we had to go round up people to make certain we looked good. I said to some people in the administration, sports, whether you're baseball, football, soccer, you like to see your lead players. You like to take a picture, how many runs or bats or whatever their profile is. I told them they should be putting up the pictures of people that are the violent criminals they've apprehended and removed. Then you'd have the public's attention. But when you go to these street festivals and arrest people, take the kids, the parents, it's a no-win situation. You're never going to get public buy-in to the mission if that's the way you operate. So ICE needs to get its act together. Kristi Noem needs to stay off the TV. Tom Homan, who I'm not a big fan of either, but Tom at least went to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and tried to calm the fears. He's an experienced border control agent, so he has a little bit more skin in the game. But we took a former governor from North Dakota, made her the czar. Her boyfriend is a former Trump guy, Corey Lewandowski, who she's been having a relationship with. All this thing clouds the conversation. And I'm not trying to throw her under the bus, but she doesn't belong as the head of the agency. She doesn't have the chops. She doesn't have the skill, nor does she have the compassion. The first word we should be dealing with in elected officials, in immigration, in courts, is compassion. Figuring out who has a legitimate claim, who has been here and abided by the law, should be given the first opportunity to apply. And that's why I go back to my conversation about Palantir or some other company. It doesn't have to be Palantir. I just use this as an example because they probably won $10 billion of contracts with the Defense Department because their technology is good. Well, if we're that good at figuring out how to launch drones, why can't we figure out how to get people in the queue? We do it for Social Security. We do it for Medicare. We have everybody's number. Everybody goes to the doctor. You present a card. They let you in. You get to see your physician. They bill Medicare. It works. Why can't immigration be the same? And the only way, in my opinion, we're going to ever solve this problem is let people come forward out of the shadows and apply. Then we'll be able to determine what they've done since they've been here, what their parameters, have they had a job, have they gone to school, do they have a good driver's license, good driving record, call the bad people from the good and move forward. But right now I find we're in a stalemate. The politics of this are so potent that even someone like Marco Rubio, whose parents came from Cuba, couldn't stay with the bill because he felt threatened by voters in Florida that said, don't allow those people in here. Much like my story about the Puerto Ricans. It's like, hold on, they're American citizens. Would you all get an education before you start castigating people who happen to live in an island that's ours? But they don't get it. They think, oh, they're Hispanics. They don't belong here. They're Puerto Ricans. I'm going, holy mother of God, can you all get real here? So, but Richard knows this. He deals with this and probably some of the nicest, hardworking people I know he's represented should have been through this process 15, 20 years ago. And they're not. And so why would anybody step forward and volunteer to become eligible for citizenship when you know all these thresholds prevent you from reaching that goal? You know, when you go out in a golf match, you say, I better practice. I better work on my golf swing. I better learn putting. You don't just go to a golf match and say, I'm here. I want to try and play. I've never played before. You don't do that. Why can't we make it that easy for people to step up, like my grandmother did, learn English, go to community college, get that certificate that she presented to immigration naturalization so she could get this certificate. She cleaned 38 rooms a day at a Holiday Inn in California. She worked hard every day, and I love my grandmother for this because she didn't have anything given to her. She earned it, but they paid her back by giving her that naturalization certificate. That's what I want for people in this country, whatever their nationality, a chance to be able to be citizens of the greatest country on earth.
Thank you, Mark. If it's okay with Luis, I want to go to our online. I know you have a question. You've been waiting. And I'll start with Sarah Valente. She wasn't able to unmute, so she posted her question. I have a question, but can't unmute. What do the speakers think will happen to the DACA program under Trump? It sounds like the recipients represent exactly what Mark Foley is saying about the quote unquote model immigrant. So maybe that's to Mark.
Repeat the question, I missed.
What do the speakers think will happen to the DACA program under Trump?
Well, he was initially very responsive to it. You know, he was for DACA back in 16, 17, and 18. And the Biden administration had the challenges of allowing everyone in. And so the political expedience of supporting DACA was kind of negated. So I hope, and I think he has said this before, I hope he would do it again, because the children that have been here should be the first consideration, especially if they've been here 5, 7, 10, 12 years. I hope he goes back to that positive view he had of that program in his first term.
And Richard?
Well, I got to tell you, DACA is one of the most important types of cases that I have in terms of my clients. And one of the cases I go to DC to advocate on behalf of my clients. It's the DREAM Act. It's for dreamers. And it's basically for people that came to the United States before they were the age of 16. So obviously a juvenile minor didn't have the choice or a decision made to come here. It was their parents or family that brought them here. And that they've been here for a good, I believe, 10, 15, 20 years at this point, because there was a cutoff of 31 at the age of filing for DACA. So a lot of kids that came when they were 2, 3 years old, a lot of kids that came, as a baby even. And once they graduated high school, they're hitting a brick wall in terms of being able to go to college because they had no immigration status. So that's why DACA came about. One of my clients, Manuel Guerra from Mexico, was one of the 4 national leaders of this DREAM Act movement. This is now 13 plus years ago in 2012, 2011, under President Obama. And he marched to Washington, D.C. He marched to Tallahassee in support of the notion that as a dreamer, as someone that came to this country as a kid, so again, wasn't your decision or choice to do so. And then you're here for so many years, you're educated here, and you're willing to go to college, university, join the military, et cetera, and you're just unable to because of your status. And the DACA, when it finally did come out, he missed it by a month. He had come when he was 16 and 1 month old. So because he missed it by 1 month, he wasn't ultimately eligible for DACA. I was able to get his deportation case terminated and dismissed, one of the first cases in the country where something called prosecutorial discretion actually happened, where the prosecutors looked at his case and said, what's our real interest here? Why would we consider this young man as priority to deport from this country? And the prosecutors basically agreed to dismiss his deportation case, but he was never eligible for DACA by one month. It was unbelievable. And so I think it would be political suicide for any administration to end DACA. DACA continues. They're not taking any new applications from new people that may at some point have qualified. This is really a locked-in program from 12, 13 years ago. 2012 is when it was created. And so they continue to renew it now for 12 years. But there is no pathway to a green card for these people. Some maybe if they, let's say, get married in the course of time and they came to this country legally with a visa, just overstayed their visa, they may be able to get a green card, or there may be some other ways for them to change their status or adjust their status. But it's truly, I think, political suicide for Trump or any administration to take this away, because again, in a lot of cases, it's kind of like TPS, temporary protected status. I mean, there are people who are here from Honduras for 20, 25 years from Honduras that have bought houses, have had work permits, have raised their American kids here. And to just pull the rug out from these people after this many years of being told you can stay, being told you here's a work permit, here's a social, here's a driver's license. And for years they have been here working. You know, I think, again, it's political suicide. I remember once going up to D.C. under the first Trump administration, and I went to Brian Mast, and I hate to name names here, but I have a lot of respect for Brian Mast as a veteran, disabled, injured. You know, he's a very intimidating guy, honestly. He, you walk into his office, and he's got the steel rods in his legs from serving our country and fighting for our country. And I guess I was sent there by my team, because I guess I'm considered center right, and I was, you know, I'm a tall guy, and I'm going to be able to handle, you know, this member of Congress. And I got to tell you, I walked in there and I used the trump card, so to speak, which is DACA, the Dreamers, which generally speaking is the most sympathetic and compelling and strong type of case to talk about to a member of Congress. And honestly, when I walked in and started talking to him about some of my Dreamer DACA clients and can we start looking into a pathway to a green card or resident status for these people? I mean, he literally told me, absolutely not. They need to all leave. They all need to just appreciate the fact that they were allowed to be here and were educated here, but they all got to leave and they all got to go home. And they all got to thank God that they had their chance to be here, take their skills or their education they received here back to their countries, and forget there's no future, there's no, you know, reform or any kind of pathway to status for these people. So it's a very challenging issue. And just to finish off on the issue of DACA, I got to say, there was also a time at the beginning of the first Trump administration where it was all about the wall and trying to get the money to build the wall. And I can remember meeting with Democrats, and the offer was, or the consideration at the time was, if you provide the money and the resources to fund the building of the wall along the border, that Trump would agree to a pathway to citizenship, and certainly a green card at the beginning and then citizenship later for all these Dreamers. And you talk about 800,000, almost 1 million people in this country that are Dreamers with DACA status. And the Democrats shut it down. They said, no, we're not going to spend a dime on your wall. And we are not going to, you know, make that a condition on these people getting their status finally, even though many of them have been here so many years. So the political challenges, it's called the third rail of politics for a reason. I mean, it's a very, very difficult issue with so many implications and so many challenges when it comes to immigration.
Richard, we have only a few minutes left. I have 3 more questions online. Luis, I've been putting Luis off, but I just want to let me read these 3 questions. They're short, all at once. So Saul writes, what about when a client shows up for a green card interview and he's arrested? Is that due process? Linda, Dr. Geller Schwartz writes, for you, Richard, how difficult is it for ICE to find those under final deportation orders, other than those who are the worst of the worst? Is this where this is where it appears they should be starting to fulfill their quota for deportation? And then she writes again, Linda, it was announced a few hours ago that they had just deported 80 DACA participants. And she provides a link to Politico. So you have a minute. Then I want to give it over to Luis because he has a question. And Tony, I'm sorry, we may not have time for your question. But the two of you, or one of the questions was to you, Richard, but do the two of you have any comments on this?
Well, I'll jump on it if
Yes.
Congressman doesn't mind. I mean, in terms of the first question about showing up to a green card interview and facing arrest, and is that due process? I mean, it's a complicated question, and I know I hate to keep complicating things here, but if that person has a criminal record, if that person has a warrant for his arrest because he didn't or she didn't take care of an old criminal case, if the person has a final order of deportation, again, some people know they have them, some people don't. When you show up to USCIS, which is the services part of immigration, as far as the services agency of immigration, there can be agents from ICE, which is a separate agency, but they do kind of work together, and they will be there to detain you if you have an old criminal record that renders you deportable, if you have an old order of deportation that's never been enforced or effectuated against you. And yes, is that due process? Well, it depends. I mean, if you went through a deportation process and a judge ordered you deported and you appealed and it was also denied, you've kind of had the due process that I think any country could afford. And so it's certainly a challenge in terms of someone that doesn't have those issues, that there may be ICE agents or the intimidation factor being utilized. There are ICE agents at immigration court hearings. People trying to go to those hearings are either presenting their asylum cases or other types of cases. And it's an intimidation tactic, frankly. It definitely is working. And a lot of people are not showing up out of fear. How difficult is it to find these people with an order? I mean, that's the second question it's challenging because you're talking about some cases from 20, 30 years ago. I know I have clients and I've met with clients that literally have an order of deportation from 1998, 1996, I mean, even earlier. And so people move, they change their address. ICE does have amazing resources and amazing skills and tools and techniques in which to locate people. They've started, using Social Security. There was just a lawsuit and I think a decision about using their medical information or using IRS information in terms of finding people with a final order. And so I think the one comment I'll make with regard to the number of deportations, I think it's really important. If we truly do have 20 to 30 million people here completely without status, illegal, without status, we've never been able to deport more than 1 million people in a year. It's just never happened. The resources are not there to be able to do it. So in these 3 years left that Trump has, you're talking about potentially a maximum of 1 million a year. That's been the history of our country. So he may have hired more ICE agents. I think he's going to try to outdo those numbers. But at the end of the day, that's pretty much what's realistic. And if you're talking 20 to 30 million people in this country that don't have status, how do you prioritize the people? And it's just really clear. If you got 1 million with an order of deportation, another 1 million that have a criminal record, and then you have well over 1 million that came in the last 4 years of Biden, those could be the focus and the priorities of this administration without all this collateral damage of grabbing and detaining people, as the congressman mentioned, at Home Depot, landscapers, people that are working with no criminal record, families, et cetera. Those should not be priority, obviously. So we just got to be able to prioritize, because at the end of the day, we have limited resources and it becomes impossible to have this large dragnet and just grab everybody, no matter whether they have quotas or bonuses or not.
Richard, to that point, and I will take a little shot at some Democrats, particularly mayors of cities and states that have adopted sanctuary policies. If they would have allowed ICE to go in to the jails to take people who had existing detention and deportation orders against them, ICE would have their hands full. But because they decided to say, ICE can't operate in my city or my state, whether it's Michelle Wu from Boston, whether it's Mandami from New York, whether it's California. So part of this has become the political tug of war. Who do you stand for? And I think Trump's speech the other night, while I didn't listen to all of it, he said, do you support American citizens or giving benefits to illegals? Well, that's not a very good way to phrase a question. But I would say to you that if the cities would have allowed ICE into the detention facilities to remove rapists, child sex offenders, drunk drivers, multiple offenders, we would be halfway there to cleaning up our community. So we're fighting two fronts: illegality and cities that are harboring criminals. That should never be allowed under any stretch of the imagination that cities would harbor people that have known felonious records of significant detrimental effects to our community. And I wish they would think about that a bit and let ICE do their job. Then they wouldn't be at festivals. They wouldn't be at Home Depots because their hands would be full of the people that should be removed from our country.
100%.
Okay, excellent. Luis, go ahead. Sorry to keep you
Well,
waiting.
first of
partner.
all, I really want to thank the speakers. I think they've been terrific, and I think what I like about it is that they are thinking in terms of solutions. And I think that's one of the problems of our Congress, that our Congress is unable now to reach compromises the way it used to be in your time, Mark, or even I would say maybe even before 1995, even more. But you mentioned, I think it was Mark, that Marco Rubio basically gave up his pursuit of immigration reform because constituencies didn't want. Well, I have to tell you that I am part of Marco Rubio's constituency, and I talk to other people who are parts of Marco Rubio constituency, as you both are, all of us are. And I can tell you that we all need those people, because when you need a plumber, when you need a worker, when you need anybody who can do something in your home, very often it is an immigrant that is coming to your home and is doing the work. So we are not only in need of these technological people, these high-tech guys, or engineers and scientists. We also need those people because we have shortage of manpower when it comes to basic trades. So I think the pressure on Marco Rubio was purely partisan. That's my feeling. That was purely partisan. Like that, we are against is exactly what Richard said. He went to Brian Mast, whom, by the way, I have a lot of respect for. Really, I have tremendous respect for. And then he said, no, because I think to a certain extent that's the party line, and the Democrats wouldn't do anything that would give a victory to the Republicans and vice versa. So the other thing that I wanted to say is enforcement of laws. You mentioned the 1986 Reagan immigration reform. One of the problems was that employers violated the law from the very beginning. They continued to hire illegal immigrants. And so that is a problem. And they were not accountable for that. Nobody punished them for that. Last but not least, ICE, a question about ICE. I agree 100% with everything you said about ICE. I mean, and how they should concentrate on those people who are in jail or who have criminal records. But why are they masked? Why are they masked like almost like Hamas fighters? You know what I mean? Hamas combatants. I understand why Hamas people actually cover their faces. Why ICE people are covering their faces? This is, it looks like, okay, they are doing something that is not legal. You know what I mean? That's bothersome.
Well, to that point, Luis,
Yeah.
and I will say, if you watch the video of the New York police officers being pelted with snowballs, that may seem innocent, but when we have a lack of authority, you really have a downward slide in humanity. The agents who are wearing these masks that I do not agree with, I think their name badges should be on, they should have cameras, their faces should be shown, but they were being doxxed, and people were harassing their kids in school. They were going after their families. They were disclosing their locations. They were saying their wife works at a bank. They were doing things that were unacceptable in a polite society. They should not be putting people's families in jeopardy, but they were. So that's when the masks started being brought
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Oh, no, there's a lot of issues with that, but they should have put body cameras on them from the start, so we would have a two-way proof of what happened at the scene of that incident. People quickly blame ICE or the police officers. Well, body cameras tell you exactly what happened on that given day. When I made that video that I think you commented on, it was about my fear that we were heading into an area where we would not come back from it. I don't want Trump to suffer a Tiananmen Square or an Ohio State University when those kids were shot and killed. That's where we're going with the way things were occurring, in my view, before those two people were killed. Now everybody's saying they were terrorists. Stop talking about American citizens as terrorists. They may have been out of order, but this is a very delicate balance of police rights and citizens' rights and a democracy, which we should all applaud. Freedom
You're
of
talking
speech.
about Minneapolis, right? You're talking about Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, right? When the woman was shot and then Alex Preddy was shot, both of them killed by ICE agents. Well, I could see that coming because lack of training, enthusiasm for rounding up people, the recipe for disaster was clearly there. So to your point, I think we've all got to step back a minute from the hostilities of the moment and try to find a way to weave together a solution for people like Richard who represent clients that they can get an expedited response to their inquiry. I will say, Richard, and I've spoken to you about this, a lot of lawyers take money from clients for immigration cases. They take their $5,000 and they never call them back.
Well, that's unethical.
Those people would call my office and said, my case has been here. Nobody calls me back. I gave my money. So we have a lot of house cleaning to do. And I'm not accusing Richard, but I'm saying there are a lot of people take immigrants' money and never do a thing. Then they call me, the lawyer, and said, can you help me with my case? So, and that's not the entirety of the immigration judicial lawyers. I'm not castigating them, but I will say there's a lot of problems in the system. And Richard, maybe you'll opine on that, but I know you work very hard. We have mutual friends that are clients of his. I've never seen anybody work harder, be more responsive, but I think he knows what I talk about when I say there are people that are fly-by lawyers that just grab cash and never follow up with the clients. And that wouldn't work in trial law. That wouldn't work in defense work on plaintiff liabilities and things like that. But Richard, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's a huge problem in the community. It's a huge problem. And I think it's primarily because of the subject, which is immigrants. And unfortunately, what these lawyers think is that these are people that are not on top of their cases. They're naive. They're scared. They're not familiar with our legal system in terms of what to do. And they take advantage of them. They take advantage of their fear and their frustration, and they don't do the work. It's a huge problem. I think about my dad in every case, my mom as well. I've got my dad's social in my drawer in my front desk. I always think about what would have happened to my parents if they had a lawyer that would do something like that to them. I'd want to strangle,
right.
Because you put your life in their hands, and it's truly and it's hard. It's hard for me to sleep at night sometimes. I can tell you, when you think about your cases and how you have these people's lives in your hands, especially when they're in deportation or they're in detention, they're in custody, in asylum cases especially as well. So I think another big problem is this issue of notarios. Notarios are not necessarily lawyers. In a lot of these countries, notarios are lawyers. So they go to these notarios, notaries. And in this country, they're not necessarily lawyers. They fill out forms and they don't even tell the people what they're doing in terms of these forms and these applications that they file. And that's a huge problem. It's called UPL, unauthorized practice of law. It's just like practicing medicine without a license. It's a felony. And the consequences, especially under this administration, of practicing law without a license by filling out government forms, doing actual legal work when you're not even a lawyer. Half these people don't even speak English, so how the hell are they filling out these forms? I mean, people that take advantage of their own communities. I know Haitian American lawyers that take advantage of their own Haitian clients.
Oh, no question.
And it's threaten to call immigration on them if they don't pay their bill. I mean, that's completely unethical, obviously. So there's a lot of this going on, and it's horrific. And yes, in immigration in particular, in this field, it's such a huge problem, and it's really sad to see.
Well, my final point is if I can order sushi on my phone, if I can buy gold bars at Costco, if I can reach out across the world and buy a bond of a foreign country, I should be able to take this similar device and help people get registered, at least to have some degree of evidence that they're in the system, that they're trying to gain citizenship. That's all I ask for. It's not that complicated. Everything else works with metrics like our phone, but people who are sitting in line hoping that they can have some degree of certainty that they'll at least be allowed to get to the next step. Those cases are horrific to me, where somebody is taken down to Alligator Alcatraz, held for 6 days, when virtually everybody on the island of Palm Beach knows him, and now he's shackled to the ground because he had dark window tinting. Give me a break.
With that, I do want to close this out. We've run over time. It's such an excellent program. And your last comment really, Mark, was very poignant and really to the point. But as we conclude this discussion, I want to thank Mark and Richard for sharing their perspectives and experiences and putting a human face on the issue. And you both added a human face, speaking about your families and about the people you've dealt with. We may not always agree on every policy solution, but what should unite us is this commitment to a serious debate.
I think it was terrific. I second.
Yeah, it was really, really terrific. We could go on for another hour, I'm sure. But I do want to thank not just the speakers. You guys were fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And we'll have to pick this up again. But thank everyone who came. Certainly some people I've not seen for a while. Terry, Sarah, Karen, I haven't seen you. But I do want to add this, the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research, as I said at the beginning, is a 501c3 nonprofit. The programming we provide, such as this excellent, superior program with really, you guys are the best, is made possible through the generosity of supporters who believe in informed and serious dialogue. And if you value this kind of discussion, I encourage you to visit palmbeachdemocracy.org and consider supporting our work by clicking on the donation page. I also want to thank Luis, my partner in this venture. We're what, a 7 or 8 year overnight success, something like that. But on behalf of the center, thank you all for joining this evening. We appreciate your engagement and signing up for this program, and we look forward to continuing these important discussions in the future. So thank you very much, and also good to see you, Linda, and everyone else I didn't acknowledge. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Richard. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.